Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Jalyssa. I'm a journalist with Middle East Observer, and joining us today is Kevork. He's a Syrian analyst and journalist. Kevork, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course, we're so excited to speak with you today. Hopefully, bring some more insight to the events that are going on in Syria at this time. So, I'll just kind of get right into it. So, in the early weeks of December, Syria was seized by terrorist opposition forces. Bashar al-Assad was overthrown in what seems like a lightning blitz for sure. It feels almost like it just came out of nowhere overnight. What do you make of the events that kind of acted as the catalyst for what we're seeing now in the region? Did you even see this coming, or could you have anticipated it at all?
Actually, I anticipated the attack from HTS against the government forces in September, late September of last year. And around 5 to 6 weeks later, the attack started. How I anticipated this is important because I think many of us and many people see the region as divided, like Syria separately, Lebanon separately, Palestine separate, Jordan separate, because in our minds, we have been told that this region is different states and mini states, just like the Sykes-Picot division has been 100 years ago. But the truth of the matter is, when Syria sneezes, Lebanon gets cold. And when Palestine sneezes, Syria gets cold, and vice versa. These countries are so interconnected on a civilizational level, on a population level, economically, culturally, language, that we interact and we are influenced from each other's problems and achievements in the region. And therefore, when in 2011, the US, Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and many other, Israel, they had the plan for regime change in Syria. And this plan was a long time ago, but when they put it into practice, um, people didn't see it as part of the axis of resistance against the axis of the US in the region, because in their mind this was about democracy, human rights, etc., from the progressive, or let's say more liberal lens of seeing this conflict in the region. But during this time, we have seen that the issue in Syria was geopolitical. And they wanted for Syria to stop supporting the resistance in Lebanon, the resistance in Palestine, close their offices, and normalize relations with Israel, and cut strategic relationship with Iran. And if Syria does these things, then they will stop the regime change war. So I put this context in mind, and I see that between 2011 and 2018, there was a hot war in Syria, in insurgency. And then from 2018 to 2023, there was an economic warfare against Syria, because they wanted to demoralize the Syrian people, the Syrian army, impoverish the people, and send them below the poverty line. And they succeeded in that. Above 90% of the Syrian people live under the poverty line. So when the October 7 happened, and Hezbollah participated to support their Palestinian allies and Palestinian brothers, basically in the Gaza Strip, there were immense pressure being put on Damascus to stay on the side, to stay neutral on this. And Damascus technically stayed on the neutral side. There were proposals from Iran and other players in the region to open a front against Israel from the Golan Heights, and Syria said no, because they wanted to balance the relationship between the Arabic countries and Iran, and they were like, we just came out of war and we want to reconstruct, we don't want to open a new front line, but we will keep allowing the supply chains to continue going to Hezbollah at the same time. But when Israel escalated in a brutal way, let's say, committed an act of genocide, basically in Gaza, decapitated the leadership of Hezbollah, killed Ismail Haniyeh in Iran, and have shown that it has no red lines. And they can perpetrate anything they want with full backing and blessing of the United States. At this particular time, the Jordanian foreign minister came to Damascus and delivered an American-Israeli message. This was before my prediction that it would happen. So once he was in Damascus, he delivered a message saying that there is a potential ceasefire agreement in Lebanon And when all the parties sign on this agreement, we expect from you to participate in the ceasefire agreement as a player who can siege Hezbollah, meaning that they have to seal all the borders and cut all the supply chains to Hezbollah. And this was the time when I said the attack is going to happen, because I knew that the answer was no in Damascus. And this was my sources telling me that the answer was no. And if you see the map of control of Syria, and you realize that the only military force capable of threatening the Assad government is HTS. And I said the closest, nearest governorate to Idlib, HTS held Idlib, and the most important one is Aleppo. So they will attack on Aleppo. They will do this. I wrote about it 3 times, and it happened. So this was part, if you put it in the proper context, this was part of the Israeli war against the axis of resistance, and they were successful in accelerating the regime change war and eliminating Assad from the equation for the time being.
Definitely, I definitely agree with you there. So in terms of HTS and knowing that this was definitely premeditated, they were being primed and everybody was being positioned well before, you know, your analysis came before September, like you said. Do you think there was any way to prevent this? Could the AOR have prevented this or kind of like mitigated maybe the fallout from this at all? Was there any stopping?
You mean stopping the attack against the government forces,
Yeah.
right? I think this was a major security failure, intelligence failure for the Assad government, basically the former one. I have asked many sources in Damascus, and there was a consensus that they were shocked. And personally, I was shocked that they are shocked, because this was so clear it is going to happen. And with the presence of the Russian observation points and with the Syrian military there, for me, it was impossible not to foresee the attack. Because remember, when HTS forces start sending, let's say, these Toyota trucks, PKCs, and some of the armored vehicles, it's not like there are 100 meters separates between the both sides. There are many kilometers separate between the both sides. So watching them advancing from Idlib to Aleppo, it took them a few hours. So it is impossible for the Syrian artillery not to see it, for the Air Force not to see it, and for the soldiers. But what happened is the attack of HTS was multifolded, multifaceted, and they waged not only military offensive, they waged a psychological offensive against the Syrian army and against the people in Aleppo. They demoralized them before even they conquered the first neighborhood in Aleppo. They were very successful, very professional, and I would suspect that this was more a Turkish, British intelligence operation, because they're the ones who are really good in this type of psychological operation. And especially when you see the media outlets embedded with HTS. We're talking about Al Jazeera, we're talking about Middle East Eye, we're talking about Syria TV, funded by Qatar. Those are all Qatari funded or affiliated outlets. And they have scared the people to the extent that they don't want to fight any longer. We're talking about the normal people. But with the Syrian army soldiers, for them, I don't think it was worth fighting any longer. This is the issue that many people, if you live in Syria, you know that a normal soldier receives a $30 per month, and the senior officer receives a $50 per month. So there is a big opportunity, or there is a need for money, and then corruption comes into play. So you cannot feed your family for $30 or $50 per month. And with the inflation and the sanctions, the country's economy is decimated. So the people were like, I'm a soldier on the front line, but my family is hungry at home. Like, what am I fighting for? I already fought for 7 years, and we thought this is victory. But after the victory, the life conditions deteriorated. So the people, why would they do a second round of fighting if this is the result, you know? So this was major issue for the soldiers not to carry out the fighting. But this was mostly in northern Hama, Homs, and Damascus when the soldiers laid down their arms. In Aleppo, it was the shock factor. And once Aleppo fell, I said, if the Syrian army wants to restore Aleppo, they will need not few hundred or few thousand forces from Iran, Iraq, and the other. No, they need tens of thousands of them. And this will take planning, and this will take months to advance to Aleppo. It's not easy to recapture a city when the militants are inside the city. And this will be on a second round of destruction of the ancient and historic city of Aleppo. So is it worth it? So those are all the questions raised by the different parties in Damascus. And it seems that there was also a deal between Russia, Turkey, Qatar, and Israel, and the US in Syria, that everyone secures their interests. The Russians are still in the Mediterranean. The Qataris have achieved the Ikhwanization of Syria by bringing the Muslim Brotherhood types to power and also can extend their gas pipelines. Turkey is a similar case because they will become an energy supplier and distributor of Qatar and Russia to Europe. And thirdly, they will also have their allies, basically the Muslim Brotherhood, in power in Syria. Israel secured its interests in the south. And the US is still now with the Kurds. They don't know what to do because Turkey is against it. So I think this is a formula for more conflict in the region, unless, let's see if Trump comes and imposes some compromises on Turkey, because it seems that he managed still, we don't know 100%, but to force a ceasefire deal in Gaza on Netanyahu. So if he is going to enforce some solutions, America is the biggest, strongest power now in the region. This was a big opportunity for the axis of resistance to counter the American dominance over the region and to shift the balance of power. And there was a point when they were going tit for tat with the US. And a few months later, of October 7, I think Israel was in a big trouble, and the US was in a big trouble in the region. But they have taken big, bold moves against the major players of the axis of resistance. And I see now that this axis wants to take a step back and recalculate and see what were the failures. Or this is, I suppose, has to happen if they want to come back in the future. But I would argue that it's very difficult to do this unless there are parallel financial systems and de-dollarization. This is going to be a very difficult task for anyone who wants to counter the hegemony of the US, whereas the US has the absolute hegemonic power over the dollar and weaponizes it, and it imposes sanctions and impoverish people, or stops the development of countries and peoples, like they tried to do in Cuba, in Iran, in Syria, and some of these countries were victims, and the sanctions worked. I would argue sanctions worked in Syria, and this is the reason. So we need more Russia and China to play bigger roles in this anticipated multipolar world. But until this moment, it seems that we are still in a unipolar world and not in a multipolar world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wrote an article on the unipolar liberal order in America kind of getting left behind, maybe if they don't catch up in time. So I definitely agree with you there. As far as the axis of resistance, I wanted to ask you, since you brought it up, for the axis of resistance, we saw the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, we saw the assassination of Yahya Sinwar, we saw the assassination of Syed Hassan Nasrallah. And these were very great losses for the axis of resistance overall. I think a lot of the sentiments in the community, or if people were watching and paying attention, was they were like, no, we can bounce back from this. These are factions and resistance groups that don't allow the head of the snake to be cut off. So when we talk about the AOR kind of playing a role in this, do you think it was possible, or I guess, do you see it as a major loss or something that they could potentially bounce back from regardless?
Yesterday in my live streaming, I was talking about this, and a few commentators said they sense a Zionist in my explanation, because I was critical of the approach of the axis of resistance. And I want for the people to understand that when I criticize, it comes with not with bad intentions, because it's important for after every failure, even in our personal lives, to take a step back and see it from outside and fix the errors. And if we don't acknowledge that there is a failure, then everything was successful, right? I don't know if this was a success the past year. I think that the axis of resistance received major blow. Yes, Israelis received blows, but the axis of resistance also received major blows. So if you want to reconstruct the axis or an alliance of state and non-state actors, we have to acknowledge, and the people have to acknowledge, that there were mistakes or failures in this case. And I think the difference between the Western world and the world in the Middle East, there is a big difference in how things are operated in the West and how things are operated in the Middle East. Like in the West, there are deep states. So the deep states are in charge of the major headlines of the foreign policy, security affairs, etc. And when a president goes, when a prime minister leaves, when somebody even gets killed, it doesn't change anything in the system because the system is operational. And the people who come and leave, they are just soldiers in this system, in operating this system. So one person leaves and one person comes. Like if you see the situation in Syria, for example, it was built on person. And once this person left, the country collapsed. There was no deep state. In Egypt, there is a deep state. It's the military. And the military was capable of enforcing solutions on the country, even president on the country when they kicked out Mohammed Morsi. In Hezbollah's case, I don't know if people would disagree with me. I lived in Lebanon for 3 years, and I lived in close to al-Dahiya, the southern suburbs of Beirut. I interacted with the people, the Shia community, a lot. And what I sensed is Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was not a political figure for them. Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah for them was represented an idol, a leader in life, before in politics, a leader of resistance, before a leader which can negotiate and strikes diplomatic deals. They saw him as a father figure. When Nasrallah came, he was young. And he grew up and even matured. If you watch his old videos, some of them were, sorry to say, cringe. And you see that he really worked a lot, even on himself, education and culture, and how to deal with the press, and how to deal with the people, and how to talk to his allies, and how to talk to his fans, and how to talk to his enemies. He was a master in public relation, and people looked up to him. And when he was killed, every person I asked in Lebanon who supported him said, we lost a father. So they felt like they were orphans. And now that I speak with my, again, friends and colleagues in Lebanon, the excitement after October 7 was so high. And now I'm not saying the excitement is gone, but definitely it diminished. The excitement for continuing the conflict with Israel has diminished. And I think this is going to be a very difficult task for Hezbollah to find someone to lead, because a group like Hezbollah cannot be led by any person. And this is a project of resistance against Israeli occupation forces, and also to preserve the community, which is a minority community in the broader sense in the Middle East. So it's a big job. And I think that Sinwar also was a leader. But in the situation in Gaza is very, very different now in terms of the destruction that Israel has inflicted upon the Palestinians. And I would argue that in Gaza, Israel didn't achieve the goal of destroying Hamas, but it destroyed the Strip completely. And the people need to know that genocide is not like killing everyone. Like, there is a misconception about what genocide is. If you kill 100 people with the intent of killing the entire people who belong to a particular ethnicity or religion, then it is a genocide. You have the intent of committing a genocide, even if you kill 50 people. But the Israelis have probably killed over 100,000 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, and they have decimated the entire neighborhoods. There is no place for the people to live any longer. So they have there is no water, there is no electricity, there is no hospital, there is no school, there is no mosque, there is nothing left. Which means Israel already destroyed the Palestinian people in part. Because that's the literal definition of genocide. It's the destruction of a people, ethnic or religious people, in part or in whole. And they have destroyed, because they have destroyed their hopes, they have destroyed their dreams, they have destroyed their presence, and they have destroyed their infrastructure completely. So what are the Israelis are going to do right now with the potential ceasefire agreement? It's a very interesting question, because I think that the Israelis would not give up on Gaza. So they have failed in the military sense, but I believe like they're going to do like in Lebanon, like bringing the Palestinian Authority back to the Gaza Strip, for example. And we all know what is the Palestinian Authority. Palestinian Authority is the same like the Israeli Authority at the current moment, right? They are cracking down on the resistance in the West Bank, and they will try to copy similar experience in the Gaza Strip. Like in Lebanon now, they have Joseph Aoun, who is a Saudi endorsed, American endorsed, and I think the prime minister now is also American endorsed. So they can find a political formula. They will try, let's say, to find a political formula. That's why I'm not here to disappoint people or destroy their morals. I'm just saying what Israel thinks and what are their goals, so that the people would be ready for the next steps.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you on so many points here. So as far as Said Hassan Nasrallah and his, his death, I too had a lot of Shia friends that we spoke, and they were like, if my own father died, I wouldn't be this sad. Like, I am broken. They needed like weeks to, to recoup and try to get over this and make sense of everything. Likewise, I agree with you. It's very institutional in the US, very deep in as far as organizational ties and things like that, in a way that it wasn't in Lebanon. It was like strictly manpower. And so I agree with you there. As far as your definition of genocide, I love that you said that, because I wrote about the same thing, is that we can classify genocide based on intent. And the, the sentiments that I see with Zionists primarily is they say like, this can't be a genocide. Like they're just collateral. This can't be a genocide. Not that many have died. And I'm like, no. It's really actually not necessarily. Initially, it's not about maybe how many have died. We can classify it based on intent. We see that, first of all, they're deliberately targeting civilians. We even see the sentiments with their leaders is like they dehumanize them in order to influence population outside of Israel so that everybody can adopt this. Like, they're dogs. They're disgusting. They don't even deserve this. Yes, they deserve to be raped and things like that. We need to push them out and we need to get them out. We're going to buy their land. We're going to make it impossible for them to even live. Something that it's not regular war. So I have like a certain disdain with people that are like, this is just war. Like, that's war. And I'm like, no, war is not keeping aid out of the country, lying about it, Antony Blinken, and then making it absolutely impossible to live, and so the deliberate targeting of hospitals and things like that. So I completely agree with you there. So yeah, I think I agree with you in the sense that we have to be able to address the voids or the gaps in our operations and maybe the system of how we're conducting these operations militarily as far as the axis of resistance goes. And you'll see so much pushback with that, is that we shouldn't question the axis of resistance, and we need to remain steadfast. And it's like, well, that's not how we're going to grow, because if we continue on the path that we're on now, we're not going to be able to circumvent future setbacks. Eventually the head of the snake will be cut off. I do agree that the death of Said Hassan kind of threw Lebanon off a little bit. Likewise, I've written so much since the political appointing of the PM of Joseph Aoun in Lebanon as well. And I'm like, congratulations to Joseph Saudi Arabia Aoun, because I'm like, why would we assume, not necessarily that anything good would come out of this, but just, it's like, look at who he's sponsored by. At the end of the day, it's like, maybe he'll do a couple good things for, Lebanon, but ultimately, can we gauge the long-term interest that it would be invested in his sponsors or Lebanon? And so I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But I think, yeah, it's okay to come to that conclusion, I guess, based on who his sponsors are. So I want to kind of direct us back to Syria really quick. So I wanted to address something that I feel like was just super controversial very quickly, which was al-Jilani. I even made a couple satirical videos about him. I ended up dropping a serious one about him, mocking him. For me, I'll say, being a Westerner, and I do understand the military in the US is absolutely corrupt. We've committed war crimes beyond any means. We have committed what we could classify acts of terrorism. I mean, we're definitely not saints at all. One thing I do stand by is that my father was in the military for 20 years. My ex-husband was in the military. And so I've been kind of embedded in this community for a while. I was personally shocked to find that we platformed al-Jilani on CNN. I mean, my mind was blown. And I think that was why I made so many videos about it. I was like, this is insane. So I want to know we know that he was in Camp Bucca and he was under al-Baghdadi. He kind of was speed dating terrorist factions, al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, and then now HTS. They're classifying him as a reformed moderate terrorist, which I just completely don't agree with. I think he's just a terrorist. So I want to know your sentiments on that. Do you think he was a plant? Do you think maybe they just identified mutual interest, or that he was malleable at Camp Bucca and then it started there? Or kind of what are your opinions overall on him?
Actually, I think that he's an asset for the US. Whether he was or then he became an asset for the US, it's irrelevant, because what he has done to Syria, let's say, and what type of operations he has led, all indicates that he was and still is an asset for the US in Syria. And one of the statements of Jake Sullivan, he's going to leave now soon, I think 2 weeks or 1 week later, he literally sent an email to Hillary Clinton saying that Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. We have a Defense Intelligence Agency document, which was a secret document later leaked to the press from 2012, early 2012, late 2011, early 2012, and they basically send an assessment to Barack Obama telling him that the driving force behind the insurgency in Syria is Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood groups. Then we have James Jeffrey, the former special envoy for the US to Syria, saying publicly that Jolani's army is an asset for the US strategy in Syria. And if we see his role in Iraq, and I was so shocked to see this 10-year-old video of Jolani speaking about Palestine and saying how much he was motivated by the Second Intifada. And I was like, bro, I was also, when the Second Intifada was happening, I was so touched by the Second Intifada, but I didn't go to Iraq and send car bombs to the Shia neighborhoods. I was motivated and I went to the demonstrations, and I was later in France, and I participated in many demonstrations for the Palestinians, and I spoke for them and I wrote for them. My researchers were I also did the jihad, right? This is a jihad. It's a struggle. Jihad means a struggle. I didn't go, and they didn't have a phase of blowing up people and tearing them apart.
Yeah.
It's what kind of phase is this? It's impossible for me to give him any justification, because in 2003, Americans occupy Iraq. Then they face serious resistance against them, and the Americans and the Brits are together, and the Americans learned from the Brits, of course, how to divide and conquer. How can they now minimize the impact of the resistance? So you prop up the Al-Qaeda elements in the Iraqi society through the Saudi intelligence, in order for these Al-Qaeda elements fight against the Shiites, because they are takfiris, basically. So they send car bombs against the Shia neighborhoods instead of fighting against the Americans. And now there is a sectarian conflict in Iraq, something that was planned by the Americans in order to kill the resistance against them, because the resistance killed 5,000 American or coalition soldiers in Iraq. So I think this is when Jolani played a role. in helping the US strategy in Iraq back then. I suspect this was Saudi intelligence work, again, with al-Jolani. Even the leadership of Al-Qaeda in somewhere in Tora Bora back then, Zawahiri, was telling Jolani, what are you doing? Like, why are you sending car bombs to the Shia neighborhoods? Like, this is not our job. We want to fight against the American occupation. For even as Zawahiri was against Jolani's terrorism in Iraq. That's how much radical he was. Now, but this type of, so there is this jihadi element of it, which is like they want to struggle militarily against in order to establish an Islamic state in their mind. But at the same time comes the element of takfirism. And when it comes takfirism with jihadism together, they distort the meaning of jihadi. Jihadi is a struggle. It could be attributed to a soldier fighting against foreign occupation. He's struggling against foreign occupation, colonialism, imperialism, etc. But takfirism means that even if there is no actual threat against you, like there is no occupation, but you're a takfiri and you're living in Syria now, there is no, there are many multiple occupations. They don't see them as occupation, but now the takfiris are killing, for example, the Shias and the Alawites. Why? Because the mere presence of this different religious sects and different school of thoughts is unacceptable under their interpretation of Islam. For them, these groups must be eliminated before the establishment of the Islamic State. This is the difference between a jihadi group which fights for a cause, let's say. Takfiris also think they're fighting for a cause, but by eliminating and committing even genocide against other communities, because they called them Khawarij, which means, or the apostates or the infidels, like, and the Takfiris kill Muslims just like they kill non-Muslims. So a few days ago, the HTS Takfiris killed an Islamic imam, Sunni imam, in Damascus because he was against the HTS rule. So any Muslim Sunni as well who opposes the ideology or the violent way they are adopting in order to reach to power, it's permissible for them also to kill this person. I will give a famous fatwa which defines takfirism perfectly. And this fatwa was issued by the former head of the Sheikh al-Qaradawi. Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi was an Egyptian scholar, and he was a notorious Muslim Brotherhood scholar based in Qatar. And in 2013, he issued a fatwa live on Al Jazeera saying it is permissible to kill every government employee in Syria, whether civilian or soldier, which means you have 60% of the Syrian people working for the government because the public sector is so big. Like if you work for the Syrian Airlines, you're a government employee. If you're working for the water dams, you're a government employee. If you're fixing the electricity, you're a government employee. Energy, military too, but the vast majority of the people are not in the military. The military was around 300,000 people. The rest is like around, I believe, 9 million, 8 million people used to work for the public sector, right? So he said live on television that it is permissible to kill civilians and militants who are affiliated with the Syrian regime. And accordingly, this back then it was Al-Nusra before they rebranded it to HTS. Al-Nusra, Islam's Army, Daesh, and all these groups, they have waged a war of takfirism against everyone who worked for the government. So they have started ambushing the government buses, sending employees to the airport. Like somebody is working as a reception and in the airport, gets killed. If you're going to school to teach, you get killed. So this is the major issue, in my opinion, with this type of takfiri groups, and this has been weaponized by the imperialist powers in the region to divide this country even further. When you have a status quo, and you want to break this statu quo, you need chaotic elements to break this statu quo and then reform a new statu quo. And these elements are the most efficient, let's say, they have proven themselves to be the most efficient groups in waging this type of wars in the region. And now once they have destroyed the statu quo, these people cannot build. They can destroy, but they cannot build. So there is going to be now a chilling moment for everyone to realize that HTS cannot build a state. And the Westerners know, the Western officials know all these things, but this is the goal. The goal to bring a terrorist into power, they know he is a terrorist, and they know he's leading a terrorist army. And the reason for it is, these elements in HTS, they know there are many takfiris among them, and they will start under different circumstances killing the minorities in Syria. So, and they're doing it mostly in homes, by the way. The footage from there is so disgusting. And why they're doing it? Because they want to push every ethnic and religious group into cantons. And once they send every of these groups into cantons, it's easier for them to divide the country. So what they do basically, they create a problem, a security condition or threat, an existential threat against, let's say, the Alawites, against the Druze, against the Kurds. And then they present the solution for them. And the solution is the foreign mandate, like they did after World War I. Now, I watched a video today of they say he's talking in the name of the Alawites in the coast, and he's calling for French to protect the Alawites. I was so shocked to see this video. And believe me, if there is an attack against Sueda, against the Druze, they will say we need international protection. And who's going to come and protect them? Americans and the Israelis. The same goes for the Kurds. So they present this problem, they pose this problem, which is a security threat, and then they present a solution which is worse and worse and worse than what the situation used to be in the past. If we balkanize Syria, I think it's the entire Mesopotamian and Euphrates and this civilization, human civilization, which started from this area 7,000 years ago. This is going to be the end of it. And there's going to be endless wars among these mini states fighting against each other for dominance, and who is going to have the upper hand. And this is just a recipe for more conflict in the region.
As far as balkanizing Syria, kind of splitting them up, the ties between Turkey and Russia, and the US with the Kurds, how do you see the state kind of being broken apart because of these kind of conflicting desires?
So there are two theories here. The first theory is that Trump has overseen this regime change war, and he wanted it to be to finish the job basically in Syria, and who are the allies of the US, Qatar, Turkey, Israel, so do it. But the second theory is, probably, this is more, in my opinion, more close to the reality, is that Erdogan is a fox, and he saw this opportunity, and he saw that if Trump comes, he will impose compromises and solutions on the region. Just like he did now in the Gaza Strip with Netanyahu, that he imposed his advisor or the national security advisor or something. He was very rude, let's say, even with the Israeli officials, and they told him today is Sabbat and we cannot really do business. And he said, I don't give a two F's about your Sabbat. I'm coming to you and we're talking about this.
I'm here anyways.
Yeah. This was reported by Haaretz. I was reading it today. So I think Erdogan was smart, and Hakan Fidan and the head of the other intelligence, they're really smart people. We have to give them credit for not doing the operation, but foreseeing what is going to come next. They're smart in this, and they thought that if Trump comes to power, and with Tulsi Gabbard in power, RFK, they all want for the US forces to withdraw from Syria. This raised an alarm in Ankara, so they wanted to finish the job before Trump comes, so that he would have a better position on the negotiation table. And let's remember that the Democrats usually have closer ties to the Muslim Brotherhood groups in the region, Qatar, Turkey, compared to the Republicans. Trump is more leaning towards Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And he wanted to designate the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, but the CIA came and told him, "Bro, what are you doing? Those are our people. We can't really designate them as a terrorist group. Those are our fifth column in the Arab world. We can't do that.
Yeah,
we need them." So I think in this case, Erdogan sensed there is a danger for a grand compromise and re-legitimization of Assad and withdrawal of the US forces from the country. This would put the Turkish investment in Syria in jeopardy. So they went into work with the Qataris, and basically they gave a service on a golden plate for Israel as well at the same time. So I would not rule out that there was a coordination with the Israeli side, because the timing was not like the moment Assad didn't even leave yet the country. They were already occupying in al-Qunaytra, and they expanded in deep inside Syria. And let's remember, before Assad fled the country, a few weeks before this operation started of HTS, Israel was already sending reinforcement to the Golan. This was one of the reasons I wrote and said that this is going to happen, because Israel was pressing Assad a lot to give this compromise and siege Hezbollah basically, and Assad rejected. So this was the result. I think that I don't want to foresee what might be in the future, but I think Trump will be tough with Erdogan this time, and they will protect their Kurdish allies. Probably they would give the Turks some additional belt in the north, but they would not allow for Turkey to destroy SDF. It's a big investment for them, and SDF is important in the Greater Israel project. We have to remember, what is the Greater Israel project, which extends between the Nile and the Euphrates? They also set the borders and who has to occupy their who has to be their neighbors. So in the Greater Israel project, the border ends in the western shore of the Euphrates, and who occupies the eastern bank of the Euphrates? It's Kurdistan, or the Kurds. So it's in Israeli interest as well to keep the Kurdish militias and encourage them to balkanize Syria even further. And they want to open a corridor between the Golan Heights to Al Tanf border crossing, to Al Qaim, and to the Kurdistan. They want to open a road basically to have an access between what they want to have, a Kurdistan in eastern shore of the Euphrates, to the Golan Heights, and also passing through Asweda. So let's see how this is a big project. I don't know if they can implement it, but they're definitely planning and trying to execute such plans for a long time.
Yeah, definitely. So on your thoughts with the Golan Heights, do you think that the civilians in those surrounding villages kind of getting ousted and humiliated, do you think that they would kind of group up and begin retaliating, or they're just kind of getting pacified, so they're just going to kind of live with this?
They would be, I would say, isolated incidents against the Israeli occupation forces, but to push Israeli forces out of Syria, this has to have organized or resistance. And this needs to have an infrastructure. It needs to have weapons, ammunition, depots, drones. You need to invest in resistance. Mm-hmm. It costs a lot. And Jolani received instructions from Turkey. This was basically revealed by one of the mouthpieces of Erdogan in the Middle East Eye, Recep something. And he said that, according to his sources, Erdogan recommended Jolani to tone down with Israel and even send positive signals to Israel. And the article was basically Turkey is not interested in conflict with Israel in in Syria. So the title says Turkey doesn't seek conflict with Israel in Syria. Here is why. And he's basically explaining that Turkey is not an enemy country to Israel. And HTS is under basically Turkish control. It's a Turkish intelligence contract at the end. So I don't think Jolani himself or his group will do that, but definitely the people may. But they will not have the impact to kick the occupation forces out. I'm pessimistic about this case, and I think that the Goen Heights and the higher hills in Syria have gone for now. Israel would never restore these territories. And all this talk about the sovereignty, territorial integrity of Syria by foreign diplomats is just... It's just, sorry, but yes, they don't care about the Syrian sovereignty or territorial. Like, I don't judge them by what they say. I judge them by what they do, and what they're doing on the ground is complete disregard to the sovereignty and integrity of Syria. They have torn Syria apart, and now they are going to suck it dry, and they will send their corporations to invest in Syria. They will have their upper hand over the natural resources. The military will become like a police, like in the West Bank of the Palestinian Authority. So no, under such circumstances, Syria has no chance against Israel. So I'm one of the pessimistic people because I'm realistic on this case. I think probably in 30 years, 20 years, 30 years, I don't know, maybe in 10 years, but it's going to take a long time for an organic group to grow and have also the backing of a regional power or an international power. Israel has the US in its back. So how are these some civilians going to resist against Israel? They have no chance.
Even them bombing the weapon depots and the military infrastructure in there to completely dismantle, I mean, any opportunity to resist or for people to, the civilians to seize this. So I want to ask you, in terms of resistance for the civilians, Syria is multicultural. Would you agree?
Yes, definitely. But it is organic multicultural, not enforced from outside.
And so this society is not compatible with Takfirism at all. And so I guess my question is, what do you see happening to that society as far as like it being multicultural, HTS kind of coming in, the country being balkanized anyways? Do you see any separation or unity in that with Syrians generally?
Syria is multicultural, and Egypt is more, let's say, the vast majority are Muslim Sunnis, right? And when the Muslim Brotherhood came to power, what did they do? The first thing, they infiltrate the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Tourism. They try to Islamize the curriculum, the press, the media. This is what HTS is doing. Now they have strong grip over the press and TV outlets, so everything you watch and hear on radio or television is just circulated by HTS. The curriculums are changed into more, so now they don't agree with the evolution theory, and they started separating women judges from men judges, women lawyers from, like, what they're doing basically is not even Islamization of the country. I don't even know what to call it. They're segregating basically between ethnicities and sects, and then women, gender, everything is about segregation for them. And I think in the next stage, they're going to, thanks to their soft power in social media and the press, try to convince the people that this is the right approach. And now the 30% of the people might not agree with this. And even in the Sunni community, probably half of them would not agree with this. But what choice do they have? So what is the choice of the Syrian people? What are the choices of the Syrian people? To revolt against Jolani? So revolting against them needs weapons because they have lots of militants, which means you need backing. If this is not possible, then what is possible? What is possible is the easy solution for the people. Okay, let's divide. We don't want to live with them. So this is the danger that I was warning for a long time. And I said, look, Assad is not a saint. And sorry, like, I don't give two Fs about Assad personally, but this is what's going to happen if he leaves. Now, people will start thinking narrow, because when you have a group like HTS occupying Syria and they're committing this type of ethnic and religious motivated crimes, then the people will feel like their existence is threatened, and they will start thinking narrow. They will not think as Syrian, they will think as group, as clan, as tribe. And for the first time in my life, I haven't seen since the inception of this regime till today, somebody comes and says, this is a demonstration of the Christians. It's like, what is this? I never heard of demonstration of the Christians in Syria. Like, what are they? Like, everybody brings his cross and says, I'm Christian. How do you identify yourself? Or you, like, if somebody comes and not a Christian, and how do you know that he's not a Christian, right?
Yeah.
But so there is a protest for the Christians, a protest for the Jews, a protest for the Kurds, a protest for the Alawites, protest for the Shiites. So what is this? They have destroyed the national identity of the country, and the national identity is the identity which combines everyone under one umbrella. And once this umbrella is gone, then everything is vertical. Now people start thinking in tribal ways. So I think why Jolani wants 4 years to rewrite the constitution, because during these 4 years a lot will happen. And they will drive the minorities to the edge in order for them to ask for international protection. And this is the real danger, that they say, oh, let's first federalize Syria. And I want to explain this, because I'm not against federalism. Federalism is a good political system if it unifies the already divided countries in the region. Like, if we have a federal system between Iraq and Syria, Syria and Palestine, Lebanon and Syria, this is a good formula to bring these countries together socially, economically, politically. Every country would have their own administrative or political autonomy, but there is an increasing cooperation and assimilation between these two different countries, and that's a good thing. But if you want to divide what is already divided in Syria, and in this federal system, and especially in the worst way possible, like sectarian type, this is going to be the worst case scenario for Syria. And if this will reflect on Lebanon, and you will see once Syria is federalized, everybody will come in Lebanon, especially the Maronite Christians, and say, we don't want to live with the Muslim people there. We want to have our own. This like, Lebanon is already this size, and they want to make it federal system. It's like, what? You have this mountain and I have that mountain. What are they doing? Like, people do not see beyond their noses any longer. And I come from a place where I'm not even an Arab. I'm an ethnic Armenian born and raised in Syria. And I'm like, guys, like, we have to think big. Like, we have to bring these countries together, because first we have to establish economic integration between these countries. Lebanon is an amazing place for services and tourism, but Syria is an amazing place for industries and factories. So we have potentials. You have potentials. You can attract tourists, and we can attract businesses and industries. So we can complement each other. But the people only see the region, as I started this conversation with you at the beginning, in the context of, no, we have borders between Syria and Lebanon. Excuse me, but who drew these borders between Syria and Lebanon? Who drew these borders between Syria and Palestine? And who put Israel in the middle between the Levant and North Africa? Why there is Israel between Egypt and Syria? Because the biggest threat to the hegemony of the West, especially the British Empire back then, was for any strong power to rise in the region and have an access between the coast of Syria and the north of Egypt. Every empire passed through the region. They tried to occupy these coastal belt between Latakia, Beirut, Haifa, all the way to northern Africa, to Egypt. They all tried to do that because they knew this is an important trade route. It's important. There is the Sinai. There is the we have in Syria the Euphrates. We have the Mediterranean. There's so many aspects, geopolitical importance for it, that any power could have an upper hand in this region and can bring prosperity to the people. And if you bring prosperity and independence, you're already a threat to the unipolar world. And the unipolar world wants to keep its absolute hegemony. So the people who helped HTS nowadays, they basically helped the US unipolarity against multipolarity. So if we see it in a different way, I totally respect all opinions, but I truly believe that the motivations of the imperial powers in the region is against the interests of the people. And I cannot come today and say, this is a very basic question. I ask, like, I just want to give this quick example. Okay, Assad fled and everybody is celebrating, hey, including my friends. And then I call them, I'm like asking questions. So who visited Syria? Or like, okay, the German foreign minister, British diplomats, American diplomats. And I say, so who's committing genocide against the Palestinians? They say, oh, the Israelis. Who is giving them the weapons? The Germans and the Americans. Do you think that the Germans and the American governments have the best interests of the Palestinians at heart? No. But do you think they have the best interests of the Syrian people at heart? They're like, it's like error, you don't know what's happening. Who are the allies of HTS? Who gave them the weapons? The United States spent $1 billion per year on this armed insurgency, and Qatar spent tens of billions of dollars on this armed insurgency. Saudi Arabia. Name me one party which gave money and weapons to these insurgents in Syria who was pro-Palestine. One. You will not find. So how do you expect from HTS to be pro-Palestine? They are dependent on this outside aid and support. It's not really difficult.
Yeah, they're definitely being controlled. I completely agree with you. I felt that on a spiritual level. It's like, look at who their sponsors are. Look at who is feeding them this money. Look at who's giving them direction. And I say the same thing. I'm like, it's so complicated. I think people are realizing Syria is just an extremely complicated topic as opposed to Palestine, like it's very black and white for the most part. Like it's like genocide, like, and we shouldn't, the Palestinians should be free. Syria is so much more complicated, but I always, like I've said, like, even if HTS did one or two good things for Syrians, like, okay, they overthrew Assad. I'm with you. I don't really care for him. I don't care. I think he's gone now. It doesn't even matter if I liked him or not. Like, what do you want me to do? I don't care. He's gone. Like, so I'm not going to.
They still call you an Assadist. Like, Assad is gone. And if he tries to come back to Syria, and if I had the chance, I would be the first one to spit on his face. Like, I don't respect him any longer. Yeah. We're talking about the country, about the region, not about the person. Why would I care about Assad?
Exactly. And I agree with you. I've long said, like, people are kind of addressing this emotionally with like no peripheral, just like straight, like ahead, like he's gone. What did he do? And I'm like, this doesn't matter. We need to consider the long-term implications of what HTS is capable of. Not even that, what the US and Israel are capable of, because look at who they're sponsored by. And so the really difficult part about Syria was that the so-called liberation of the Syrians and the overthrow of Assad did not come at the hands of the people. It wasn't like they like revolted against this government. It came at the hands of a terrorist organization. And so when I talk about it, they're like, cry your Assadist tears. I'm like, you don't understand. Oh, I'm so worried for you. You don't even know who took over.
Block. I blocked more people. I blocked more people last month than in the past 10 years. Believe me.
Yeah, completely. I'm like, I don't even know what to tell you guys. So when we consider that, and I look, like you said, I mean, within like 2 weeks, Barbara Leaf from the United States, the White House was like out there. And I remember reading an article and she was like, he came off so pragmatic and expressed women's rights. I'm like, is it that easy? Is it that easy for Syria?
And then his justice minister was overseeing the execution of women in Idlib. Did you see that video?
I saw it. And he like, was it the one where he shot her in the head?
He gave the order because he was the judge of the court, the banana court that they established in Idlib. He was the head of the court, and he gave the order for the execution, and he was reading the order of the court so that they executed two women accused of adultery. Accused.
Right. I saw a similar one where she was a Syrian woman was accused of prostitution, and she was like, can I just see my sons? And he was like,
Yeah.
get on your knees, and he shot her. And I'm like, what? So my frustration also with people that are like, you're an Assadist, cry your Assadist tears, is they're like, why don't we wait and see? Why are you jumping the gun? And I'm like, I think the worst thing that you can do is actually wait and see. Why would you wait and see somebody who there's a 3-4 time track record for a terrorist organization that has a long history of rape, murder?
Was a phase. It was a phase.
Yeah, I mean, he's a changed guy. Like we all go through that.
Haven't you had a phase of sending car bombs to neighborhoods?
I mean, personally, I went through a phase of dyeing my hair red. I hadn't considered terrorism before, but maybe I will. But
that should be.
So it's interesting. But I was actually very interested that you said HTS. I know we're running out of time here. HTS cannot build. And so how do you see the development? Because at best it's a junta right now. We don't even have a judiciary system. I mean, these people are running rampant, absolutely wreaking havoc all across the country. There's no democratic system. We have no courts, no police officers. People are being detained and murdered. It's just like a free-for-all. It's like open season on the Syrian people, which many will disagree with me. They're like, no, we're partying in Damascus. And I'm like, like, I don't know for how long. But you said that they can't build. But they have said we'll have elections in 4 years. What do you see happening? Do you see HTS falling before that and somebody else taking over? Or what do you see for the 4-year election comment that Julani said?
This 3 years is very important because they have to draw the maps, and they have to draw the maritime borders with Turkey. Turkey is eyeing on the oil and gas in the Mediterranean, so Jolani wants to serve that to begin with, and he wants to give this for the Qataris and for the Turks to invest in the energy sector in the Mediterranean. So there are decisions, for example, changing the curriculum. Why would you change the curriculum when there is no government yet? So why are they doing it quickly? Like, why don't they wait for elections and the transitional government to come and redraft this whatever you want to change? But they are changing things that are permanent because they want to accelerate first their implementation of their vision, this what they call Islamic State in Syria, and also giving their allies, basically Turkey, Qatar, the upper hand for investments in the country, and especially in the energy sector. And when they suck dry the country and everybody has what they want, then they could have elections, and then probably we could start building a state. But if HDS stays, Jolani stay, and which all the indications show that he's here to stay. He's here to not only as a transitional or a temporary, he's here to stay, or he's here to lead from the behind the curtains. But if he wants to build a state, and I'm talking about now just in the technical term of building a state, I will definitely not agree with what type of state they're building, but he has to invite the political opposition, those who were part of different committees and different, there were so many workshops for these opposition groups under the supervision of the Americans, Carter Center, and all this John McCain Center, how to draft a constitution, how to democratic governance, all these things that they teach, liberalism, etc., etc. Then he will need these people to build him a state, because his experience with Idlib has proven that he hasn't built a state. He has built a Tora Bora, basically, in Idlib, which is a jungle, and there is no law or constitution or any court system or justice in Idlib. So we have already an experience showing us clearly what he is capable of doing and what he's not capable of doing. But if he invites these people to come to Syria to build a state, this political opposition, they're all indoctrinated and groomed by these NGOs and think tanks, and they were on their payroll. So these people will come and they want to implement a different vision, and that is this liberal democracy in Syria, right? And this is going to have a conflict with Jolani's vision. So those who have the weapons nowadays are HTS. And the people who have a vision, whether we agree with them or not, on how to build a state, they don't have weapons. And this is what we said from the beginning. Guys, you're just dressing nice suit and a tie in front of a TV. You cannot build a state because they are the ones who carry out the fighting, and they will build the state on their own when they win. So now is the time to decide. It's either Jolanistan it's going to be, or they have to bring this political opposition to build them a state. What I think is going to happen, I think that Jolani is here to stay. Jolani will stay not only these 3 years, he will draft the constitution and everything, and then he will present himself as a leader of the country, and he will continue. He's wanted by different intelligence apparatuses, unless he, of course, goes against them. And I'm specifically mean Israel and Turkey. The biggest winners of this war in Syria are Israel and Turkey. If he does anything that harms their interests, he will be eliminated very, very quickly. They know his whereabouts, they know everything about him, and I think it's very easy for them to eliminate Jolani. But Jolani, it seems that he's going to be a good boy for now, with the Turks and with the Israelis.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I've also said that we should consider him in longevity and also relevance, because I don't think he was brought here for a short time, but definitely a long time. For my last question, I want to ask you the sentiments of the Syrian people. It's hard to get a read. It's been increasingly difficult to kind of gauge where everyone is at. I know there's like partly a blackout in Syria. It's kind of hard to speak out. So I wanted to know, because all I've received is like cry Zionist tears. We love them. On the outside, we can see we're like, this might not be good. It's not looking good. Look at who just overtook Syria and overthrew Bashar al-Assad. Some Syrians are like, I hated Bashar al-Assad so much, I don't care who comes into power. There were some that were tolerant, and they were like, I don't like him, but I can recognize who's I don't want, Takfiri's taking over, terrorists taking over. So what are the sentiments of the Syrian people? Do they see HTS as terrorists? Has it not affected them directly, and so it's not real to them yet? Or are they just happy Assad's gone?
I think the last 2-3 years, I don't think that the Assad government had much of a popularity in the country, but most people stood by Assad because they knew the alternative. They know who is the HTS. They have seen the videos. Everybody watched the videos of HTS, the decapitations, and all these gruesome videos. So everybody knows what HTS is. Because of the economic situation, many people hated the Assad government due to corruption. I don't think they had a big popularity in Syria the last 2 years, but people were like, we don't want this terrorist to rule over us. But now they are the de facto rulers. And I noticed this pattern among the Syrian people. And I'm in daily touch with many people, like the Assad didn't even sit in his plane, and people were already putting the revolution flag. And I'm like, okay, I understand. Like, if you live in Syria, you have no choice. Like, I think some people, because they see HTS as a terrorist group, so they're afraid of revenge or killing, so they put this revolution flag. Some people were in the middle. They don't know what to do, and they just didn't want for HTS to rule, but now Assad is gone, so what do we do? Like, we are with these people. And some people were very supportive of HTS. I think people are divided, but what is true is most people now despise Assad as well for fleeing the country. This is going to have a big impact on the people's mood if Assad decides to come back or carry out fight against this HTS again. I don't think the people will accept him. As the Egyptians said, he's the de facto leader. People have to accept whether they like him or not. And they know what's the nature. They try to put some makeup over this Jolani. The press tried. Even the people tried. Even my friends tried. They said, oh, we went to the Umayyad Square. We spoke to some Mujahideen, and they told us they're cute and fine, and they don't want us to cover our heads. Yeah, let's take a selfie with them. And I'm like, I watch these videos. I'm like, okay, it's time for celebration. It's like in Arabic, they say, "Halla waqt al-sakra, bukra waqt al-fakra," which means like it's the time for like getting drunk now, and then tomorrow we will think about the serious issues, like, but people are still in this hyper sensational situation. I think this has already fading away. And they will notice that on the ground, the situation hasn't improved for them. And in the contrary, the country is being torn apart and they are trying to divide it. So here comes the question, who is going to change this situation? I don't think there is a fertile ground for a change. Now, even if you want them to run against Jolani, nobody will do that. People are tired. So we have to wait. We have to wait for the people to recharge psychologically, to get more ready to accept another type of change. And then maybe probably a political work should be done, or a military work could be done in order to remove HTS. But now it's not the time. I think the people are not ready for to carry out any struggle against HTS.
Definitely. I definitely agree with you there. He's not to be challenged. Nevertheless, if anybody did challenge him, it would also come at the challenging of Israel and the United States and his sponsors. And that's a very heavy burden to try and like carry over. So, yep. So I definitely agree with you there. I mean, I want to challenge, I don't know, likewise, Kevork, if you do, anybody, watching, this pod, is to maybe zoom out a little, think everything is not what it seems. We should consider, if we ignore history, let's say with the group that's just taken over, it's going to repeat itself. And so if we're not vigilant of this and kind of looking at what's happening behind the scenes, it's going to be very, very bad. We've already seen, just to recap, sectarian, ethnic, and religious minority violence throughout Syria. It's only going to, because, al-Jilani cannot be challenged, it's only going to intensify. And so it makes it increasingly difficult because the civilians can't take over. Go ahead.
If these people accept the rebranding of Netanyahu in 3-4 years from now and say he's a new man and that was a phase a few years ago to commit a genocide, then I am, as a Syrian, I'm ready to accept Jolani again and say it was a phase and he was just had a phase of decapitating people and slaughtering them, and I would accept him. If these people accept Netanyahu 3 years, 4 years from now, I'm ready to change the name of no. If can Netanyahu also change his name? Maybe, I don't know, his real name, the Polish name, we can call him that Polish name again. He's back to his
where's my ID? It's you guys' world. I just live in it. I'm ready. I will follow suit if this is how things go. Thank you so much, Kevork. We're so grateful you were able to give us a ton of insight on what's going on, and just bring us back down to earth on the reality of Syria. Definitely, I hope things get better. I hope I'm wrong. I always say that. I really hope I'm wrong. I would love to, I say all these things, you say all, we have these opinions and sentiments and facts that we have. I hope I'm wrong. I actually hope it does go, well, and that there's a 180 pivot here.
We will celebrate.
Wishful thinking. But nevertheless, we're so grateful here at Middle East Observer that you took the time to speak with us. And we can't wait to speak with you again on more developments with Syria.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.